Some friendships begin with a promise, some begin with destiny, and some begin with nothing more than a spilled bottle of ink. On a quiet monsoon afternoon in Palakkad, little Kabir sat beside his 80-year-old grandfather on the old wooden veranda. Rain tapped gently against the tiled roof as the old man held a faded black and white photograph in his trembling hands. Look carefully, Kabir, he whispered. That's me. His fingers slowly moved to the smiling girl standing beside him. And that's Anuradha. Was she party? The little boy asked. Madhavan smiled. No, Kanmani. She was something much rarer. She was my best friend. And with that, 70 years of memories slowly began to unfold. The year was 1968. Palakkad was a peaceful little town wrapped in emerald paddy fields, coconut groves, and the cool embrace of the Western Ghats. On his very first day in fifth standard, young Madhavan accidentally knocked over a bottle of blue ink. It rolled across the wooden desk, spilling everywhere. His notebook was ruined. The entire classroom burst into laughter. Madhavan wished he could disappear. Suddenly, a confident little girl with two long braids walked straight through the crowd. Move, she ordered. She looked at Madhavan, tore a few pages from her own notebook, and placed them in front of him. Stop looking like a lost goat, she said with a mischievous smile. The class laughed again, but this time Madhavan laughed too. That fearless little girl was Anuradha. Neither of them knew it then, but that tiny bottle of spilled ink had just written the first page of a friendship that would last a lifetime. Friendships rarely announce their arrival. They quietly become a part of everyday life. Soon Madhavan and Anuradha were sharing everything. He brought soft idlis with fresh coconut chutney. She brought spicy lemon rice wrapped lovingly in banana leaves. Every afternoon they exchanged half their lunch before taking the first bite. After school they raced bicycles to rain-soaked lanes, stole raw tamarind from neighborhood trees, and laughed until the monsoon drowned their voices. But their favorite ritual arrived with the very first rains each year. They folded tiny paper boats. On each boat, they wrote a secret wish before gently placing it into the Kalpathy River. As the little boats drifted away, Anuradha would smile and say, dreams don't come true because we wish for them. They come true because we never stop believing. Those paper boats would one day become far more precious than either of them could ever imagine. The years rolled by as gently as the waters of the Kalpathy River. Childhood slowly gave way to adolescence, but some things never changed. Every morning, Madhavan would wait outside Anuradha's house, ringing the tiny bell on his bicycle until she came running out with her school bag bouncing behind her. They were opposites in every possible way. Madhavan thought before he spoke. Anuradha spoke before she thought. He loved books. She loved adventures. He worried about tomorrow. She believed tomorrow would worry about itself. Yet somehow they fit together like two halves of the same story. During exam season, she patiently explained mathematics to him using stories instead of formulas. Imagine the numbers are stubborn people, she would laugh. Convince them. Don't fight them. And when she struggled with English essays, Madhavan quietly helped her weave thoughts into words. They weren't competing with each other, they were growing together. Looking back, Madhavan would often say that life's greatest blessings don't always arrive as miracles. Sometimes they simply arrive carrying another school bag. But soon, life would ask the two friends to walk in different directions. School ended, dreams grew bigger, and the world beyond Palakkad began calling. Madhavan earned admission to a university in Delhi to study economics. Anuradha was accepted into a prestigious college in Mumbai. For the first time since that spilled bottle of ink, they would no longer begin each day together. The morning Madhavan left, Palakkad railway station seemed unusually quiet. His suitcase was small. His dreams were not as the train slowly pulled away from the platform. Anuradha suddenly began running beside it. Don't become boring in Delhi, she shouted, laughing through misty eyes. Madhavan leaned out of the window. Only if you promise not to become too important in Mumbai. She saluted dramatically. Impossible. They both laughed. Neither wanted the other to see the tears that followed. Sometimes, the hardest goodbyes are not the loudest ones. They are hidden behind smiles. Because real friendship has always known that distance can separate roads but never hearts. What neither of them knew was that the next chapter of their friendship would be written not in conversations but in letters. This was the late 1970s. There were no mobile phones, no video calls, no instant messages waiting on a screen. Back then, friendship traveled inside pale blue inland letters. Almost every week, one would arrive at Madhavan's hostel in Delhi. The moment he saw the familiar slanting handwriting, he knew the day had become brighter. Anuradha's letters were never formal. She filled them with little stories about Mumbai, playful sketches in the margins, and endless reminders to eat properly and stop worrying so much. During his second year, Madhavan failed an important economics examination. Ashamed, he hid the result from everyone. except Anuradha. 4 days later, her reply arrived. It contained just one sentence. Good, now you know failure won't kill you. Underneath, she had drawn the same crooked smiley face she used to doodle in school. Madhavan laughed so loudly that his hostel roommates came running to see what had happened. Years later, he would forget many names, but never that smiley face. Little did he know. One day, those letters would become far more than memories. They would become pieces of his own forgotten life. Time has a beautiful way of changing our lives without changing the people who truly matter. The years passed quickly. College became careers. Dreams slowly turned into responsibilities. Madhavan married Radhika, a kind hearted young woman from Thrissur, whose warmth made everyone feel at home. Anuradha married Vivek, an intelligent software engineer whose quiet humor perfectly matched her boundless energy. Many friendships begin to fade after marriage. They simply grew bigger. Radhika never felt threatened by Anuradha. Instead, she often smiled and said, Now I understand why you laugh before finishing every story. Vivek would jokingly tell Madhavan, I've realized something. I didn't just marry Anuradha. I inherited a best friend too. Soon children filled their homes with tiny footsteps, sleepless nights, and endless jokes and smiles. Their priorities changed. Their schedules became impossible. Yet somehow, whenever life became overwhelming, one handwritten letter or one unexpected visit was enough to remind them that some friendships don't demand time. They simply wait patiently until life makes room again. But destiny was preparing to stretch their friendship farther than ever before. Few years later, Vivek received an opportunity that would change their lives. His company offered him a position in Dallas, Texas. It was a dream, but it also meant leaving India behind. The night before they flew to America, Madhavan and Anurad sat once again beside the Kalpathy River, just as they had done hundreds of times before. Neither spoke much. The river did most of the talking. Next morning, at the airport, Madhavan watched Anuradha disappear beyond the immigration gates. She turned one last time, waved, and made the same silly face that had made him laugh since fifth standard. He laughed again. Years later, he would still remember that face. The blue in inland letters slowly became expensive ISD phone calls. Hello, Madhav. Can you hear me? Barely. Good. Then you can't hear me scolding you. Both of them burst into laughter as the crackling international line struggled to keep up. Eventually, the world changed. Letters became emails, emails became photographs became video calls. Technology had become faster, but friendship had always traveled at the speed of the heart. Decades flowed by like the rivers they had known as children. Their sons and daughters grew up. Careers reached their destination. Grandchildren arrived with tiny hands and endless questions. Hair turned silver. Faces gathered gentle wrinkles. But every few years, whenever Anuradha visited India, one journey was never negotiable. Palakkad, the old tea stall still served the same fragrant chai. The Kalpathy River still flowed with quiet dignity. And the old veranda still echoed with laughter that refused to grow old. After retirement, Anuradha and Vivek made one final decision. They came home, back to Palakkad, back to the streets where two children had once chased paper boats through the rain. It felt as though life had completed a perfect circle. Neither of them knew that life was about to ask its hardest question. Not about distance, not about time, but about memory itself. There comes a season in life when time no longer runs ahead of us. It quietly begins to walk beside us. Retirement brought with it long mornings, slow evenings, and cups of tea shared on the old veranda. But little by little, Radhika began noticing small changes. Madhavan would spend 10 minutes searching for the spectacles already resting on his forehead. He would water the same jasmine plant twice and forget the others. One afternoon, he walked to the neighborhood shop and suddenly couldn't remember why he had gone there. At first, everyone laughed. Age, they said. It happens. But then, one evening, Madhavan looked at Radhika with quiet confusion and asked, Did we have visitors today? They had spent the entire afternoon with him. A few medical consultations later, the family finally heard the words they had been hoping not to hear: early stage Alzheimer's disease. That evening, Madhavan sat silently on the veranda, watching the Kalpithy River flow. For the first time in his life, he was afraid not of dying, but of forgetting. The very next afternoon, Anuradha arrived, not with sympathy, not with pity, but carrying a small old tin box. Every day thereafter, she came with that same little box tucked under her arm. Inside were treasures no museum would ever display: a faded inland letter, a railway ticket, a dried tamarind seed, a tiny black and white photograph, and at the very bottom, one fragile paper boat, yellow with age. Whenever the fog settled over Madhavan's memories, Anuradha would open the box. Look carefully, she'd say, "Do you remember this?" Some days he remembered immediately, some days he didn't. And on one particularly difficult afternoon, Madhavan looked at her with frightened eyes, unable to recognize where he was. Anuradha smiled, the same mischievous smile from fifth standard. "You're looking like that lost goat again." Madhavan stared at her for a moment. And then he laughed. Laughter was followed by tears, because for one beautiful moment, the little boy inside him had found his way home again. As the months passed, Madhavan slowly became stronger in spirit, not because his illness had improved, but because Anuradha refused to let him fight it alone. Yet the family began noticing something else. Anuradha wasn't the same. She tired more easily. She had lost weight. Her cheerful laughter often ended in quiet exhaustion. "Are you all right?" Radhika asked one evening. Anuradha smiled gently. "Just getting old." But it wasn't old age. It was advanced liver cancer. She had known for months. The doctors had explained everything. Time was slipping away. Yet she made only one request to her family. "Please don't tell Madhavan. If he worries about me, he'll begin losing himself even faster." So every afternoon, carrying her own pain silently within her, she continued walking to the old veranda, carrying that little tin box, helping her best friend remember, while quietly preparing herself to become one of his memories. A few weeks later, Anuradha's body could no longer hide the battle she had been fighting. She was admitted to the hospital. The room was quiet, the machine spoke more than the people inside it. Then something extraordinary happened. One morning, the fog inside Madhavan's mind lifted. For a few precious hours, every memory returned. He insisted on visiting Anuradha. When she saw him standing at the doorway, her familiar dimple appeared one last time. Madhavan sat beside her bed and gently held her frail hand. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, in a heavy, trembling voice, Madhavan softly said, "Anu, don't pretend anymore. I know what you're going through." Tears welled up in Anuradha's eyes. She looked at him in silence. Finally, she whispered, "Madhav, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid that one day you'll forget me." Slowly, she opened the bedside drawer. Inside lay the little paper boat they had folded as children. She placed it gently in his hand. Madhavan looked at it, then looked into her eyes. "My mind may forget names. It may forget places. It may even forget who I am." He gently pressed the little paper boat against his heart. "But this heart was built on our friendship, and it will carry you until my very last breath." For the first time in days, Anuradha smiled peacefully. She gently closed her eyes, as though the fear she had carried for months had finally melted away. 2 days later, surrounded by her family, she quietly slipped into eternity. The Kalpathy River had witnessed every season of their friendship, their childhood dreams, their smiles, their pranks, their promises, their separations, and their homecoming. Today, it silently witnessed one more farewell. After the funeral, Madhavan stood on the familiar riverbank, holding the fragile paper boat. Beside him stood little Kabir. "Tata, won't it sink?" Madhavan smiled gently. "Everything made of paper eventually returns to the water, Kanmani. But love always finds its way back home." With trembling hands, he placed the little paper boat upon the gentle current. Together, grandfather and grandson watched it drift slowly away, carried by the very same river that had once carried two children's dreams. Neither of them spoke. Some farewells are simply too sacred for words. Then Madhavan slowly turned away from the river and began walking home.
कभी देखो मन नहीं जागे, पीछे पीछे सपनों के भागे, तो भी देखो मन नहीं जागे, पीछे पीछे सपनों के भागे, एक दिन सपनों का राही चला जाए सपनों से आगे कहाँ। जिंदगी कैसी है पहेली हाय, कभी तो हंसाए, कभी ये रुलाए।